And today we have a young adult fictionist, a poet, and a memoirist who write about afar, but always always about the home country. They write about their conflicted remembrances of home, even as it remains their bastion of strength. Their anxieties over issues of exile and identity, integration, and resistance as they struggle to make a life in their host countries. First up will be Candy Gourlay. She's the multi-awarded author of the novel Wild Song, which has been translated into German by Alexandra Rack. Candy was born in the Philippines, grew up under the Marcos dictatorship, and was a journalist for the opposition press. She now lives in the UK and writes books for children and young adults. Her first novel, Tall Story, was selected as one of the 100 best books of the last 100 years by Book Trust, while Bone Talk is endorsed by Amnesty International. She is also a comics creator and was runner-up for the Faber Graphic Short Story Prize in 2024. Ester Tapia is a prize-winning poet. Her awards include the Ampel Gawad Balagtas for Cebuano poetry. A collection of her poetry is translated into German by Sibyl Kleffinghaus. The English title is Where is the Kite Flyer? She has been a mentor and panelist of various writers' workshops in the Philippines, including those of the Silliman University National Writers, the Cebuano Studies Center, Women in Literary Arts, and Sunday Circle. She is a founding member and former president of the Women in Literary Arts Cebu Incorporated. She hails from Cebu, Philippines, and is currently based in Nordrhein-Westfalen, Germany. Maya Butalid, who's sitting nearest to me, is a Filipina author, former political activist, and migrant advocate. While studying at the University of the Philippines, she became active in opposing the Marcos dictatorship. In 1983, she moved to the Netherlands to continue her activism. After leaving the political movement in 1993, she earned a master's degree in psychology and worked in Dutch institutions until her retirement in 2022. She is also a former city councillor in Tilburg, the Netherlands. Maya Butalid balances between embracing Dutch society and staying rooted in Filipino heritage and continuing to support Philippine development. She is also the author of The Heart of a Mother and a co-editor of Diaspora Journey, Philippine Migration and Diaspora Narratives. And we'll start with Candy.
Can you hear me? We've got 8 minutes, so I'm going to have to go quite fast. Can we have the first slide, please? I'm going to stand up because I can't see the slides. So this is a slide that shows the state of the world and the Philippines when I moved to the United Kingdom. I met my husband during the People Power Revolution, and he arrived in the Philippines with a suitcase and left with a container of furniture and a wife. He was the Financial Times correspondent. And when we moved to England, all kinds of things were happening in the world. So there was the revolution that revealed that our First Lady in the Philippines had 3,000 pairs of shoes. And I was one of the journalists who went to the palace and discovered the shoes, and she has exactly the same shoe size as me. There was also in 1992 the eruption of Pinatubo, which was one of the biggest eruptions of all time, and that is a famous photograph of a van racing away from the pyroclastic flow. It affected the weather all over the world, and it damaged the Philippines for many decades. This is a photograph of an English magazine showing a very happy couple. The woman is a mail order bride. And in those days, you had a lot of headlines about mail order brides. There was a lot of talk about prostitution, women's roles, and women seeking white men to marry. In this other frame is our nurses swearing in, because there was a huge need for nurses all over the world. And so a lot of doctors in the Philippines were retraining to become nurses, because this was access to another economy in the rest of the world. And we were bleeding nurses out to the world. And to this day, your hospitals here in Germany are probably populated by Filipino nurses. And this final photograph is a woman named Frances, and she's looking at a photograph of her daughter. Frances was one of the many, many women who left the Philippines over the 1980s, 1990s to become domestic workers abroad. And I did a documentary for the Radio 4, the BBC Radio 4, called Motherless Nation, about the children left behind by this migration. These news stories were the filter through which my new home saw me. I came to an England that saw me as a victim of disaster, someone who deserved praise because she survived the revolution. They saw me as a mail-order bride when they saw me walking with my husband. They saw me as a domestic helper. In fact, my first event as a speaker in a school, I was greeted by another author saying, "So how did you get into England? Were you a domestic helper?" And then, of course, nurses. People are always surprised that I'm not a nurse. Next slide, please. But then life changed, and this is a wonderful photograph of me marrying my husband. I love showing it because once upon a time, I had a waistline. There we are getting married, and life changed. When I first arrived in England, it was very lonely. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know the culture. There was a lot of learning to do. But once you have children, once the children begin to come, doors open, you make friends, your life changes. And I began to change, and I began to understand the world better because I became a part of my English world. Next slide, please. When I arrived in England, I was a journalist. But many, many years ago, I wanted to become an author. Not just any author, I wanted to become an author of children's books. But it wasn't possible because I lived in the Philippines that didn't have publishing. It was still a time when all the books were imported from England or from the United States. And so I didn't think I could ever become an author. And then when I had my children and I started reading stories to them, I realized that, wait a minute, I'm living in England, which publishes to the world. Maybe this was my chance. And so I began writing books. At first I tried picture books, but that was too hard because picture books are expensive and they publish for the whole world, and I couldn't find a story that would get me published. And so after 9 years, I began to write novels, and I got myself an agent by winning a prize, and I began writing novels. When I started writing novels, the novels were all set in England, with English characters, with English situations. And one agent came up to me and said, "Why are you writing with English people when you are Filipinos?" And I thought, maybe that's a little bit racist to say that I should only write Filipino stories. But at the same time, I realized that I was having a problem because I was afraid to write my own story because I didn't think that British publishing would want to publish a story with a Filipino in it. But after that agent told me that, I started writing books set in the Philippines, telling Filipino stories. And these are my 4 novels. My first one, Tall Story, was published in 2010. It's a story of a little boy who was left behind by his mother, who became a nurse in England. And he has visa problems, which is a problem that all Filipinos suffer. And he couldn't get to England to join his mother. But then something mysterious happens, something magical. He meets a witch, and the witch does something mysterious. But he begins to grow. He's the smallest boy in his class, and he grows and he grows and he grows, and he becomes 8 foot tall. And then he gets his visa. And he arrives in Heathrow, and he is a giant. And that's the story of Tall Story. Tall Story was chosen as one of the 100 best books in 100 years by Book Trust, which is the biggest literacy organization in the United Kingdom. I was there side by side with Anne Frank. And then I wrote my other novels, and my other novels all explore things to do with the life that I was living in the UK, far away from my home. All of my books have a tinge of stories of separation, loneliness, family, the desire for family. This photograph I just wanted to show you the responses to my books. At the bottom are children in England, English children celebrating because they'd read my book and they loved it. And at the top are children from the diaspora. They are children from a tribe called the Bontoc. And surprisingly, they live in Walthamstow in London. And when I published my book, Bone Talk and Wild Song, these are two books that are set in Bontoc in the Philippines. And I wrote that community and said, I have written a book set in your home. Would you come and support me? And they came. They came to my book launch. They sang and they danced, and it was the most amazing book launch that I had ever had. Next slide, please. Finally, I got my dream. I began to write picture books, which was what I wanted to write in the first place. And again, they were all set in the Philippines. So is it a mermaid? It's about an animal that lives in the Philippines. It is called a dugong. It's a cousin of a manatee. And when the European explorers arrived on the shores of the Philippines many hundreds of years ago, they saw the dugong and they thought that they were mermaids. Do they look like mermaids? And when I go to schools, I go, is it a mermaid? And they go, no. And then I found out that thousands and thousands of years ago, rhinoceroses roamed Manila. Manila, where I grew up. Manila with all the traffic, with all the noise, with all the crowds, used to have rhinoceroses. So I wrote a book called Little Rhino Lost. A little girl living in Cubao. Cubao is where I grew up in Manila, which is like full of slums and traffic and no plants whatsoever. So the illustrator Jamie Bauza actually lives in Cubao. So if you look inside the book, you will see where I live. That's what my home looks like. But this little girl meets a little rhino who's lost, and she helps the rhino find her way home. And here are photographs of me speaking to children all over the world about my picture books. Picture books are so rewarding because you speak to children like this. This is me in Hong Kong doing a game with the children. This is me in London. A little boy appeared at my event, and he had a Filipino flag. And that was just so sweet. And this is me in the Philippines, teaching in a school, talking about my books. And here I am in England again. And in England, children are not allowed to be in photographs. And that's why they've got pieces of paper over their faces.
I love
Next
these
slide,
stories,
please.
Candy,
So my life has changed. The one thing that you can guarantee living in the diaspora is that nothing stays still. When I go home to the Philippines, everything has changed. Culture has changed. And I'm still from that culture in 1989, and people can tell because I still use slang, Filipino slang, from 1989. And I realized, being in the diaspora, that I am curating a version of the Philippines for my children. These are my children and their partners. I'm curating a version of the Philippines. That's the Philippines they understand. And it might not be the real Philippines, but it is my Philippines. And they have all got Filipino citizenship, and they love going back to the Philippines. They have a relationship, and they call the Philippines home. But we have a new arrival in our family. That is Casper. Casper is blonde, and he has blue eyes. And looking at him for the first time, I was, what do I do with this? This child does not look like me. But I am thinking that he will like thinking about rhinoceroses in Cubao and dugongs in the sea. And he will read my stories of history, and he will feel like a Filipino, I hope.
From 2001 up to the present, I have been a permanent resident of Germany. Between 2001 and 2007, my husband and I shuttled back and forth between Germany and the Philippines. And from 2008 to 2022, we both worked in Nepal. Then in 2023, we were retired and are now living again in Germany. I am a poet in the Cebuano language, and home to me is where the language in which I write is spoken, and where realities are shaped by the words I write in. I come home to the Philippines every year since it is important for me to be able to talk in the language, to see how the language changes and how it is currently spoken in the streets, on the malls, restaurants, and coffee shops. It is important for me to keep myself up to date with Cebuano idiomatic expressions, the subculture codes, their jokes, ironies, and sarcasms. Going home makes me feel always both happy and sad. In the last 30 years or so, I am a witness year after year to the increasingly high socioeconomic disparities. I sense the brewing desperation of the people, their fear of lurking random violence, the poverty and want in the city streets. But on the joyful side, there is the existence of an irrefutable religious fervor and the strength and bond of families, all these 30 years. Away from home, I go back to a second home where my husband is, with a horde of new images, metaphors, lines, ideas for poems. I write. I write about the home country's fragmentation within society, the resistance against corruption, authoritarian practices of seemingly democratic rulers, the cult worship of patriarchal leaders. In Cebuano, I describe worlds I experience for Cebuano-speaking Filipinos, the juxtaposed realities among the countries I lived in, highly hierarchical societies, or that which is extremely structured and regulated. The unraveling discontent in policies on migration, health, and the pension systems. The gentleness of the Nepalis, steeped in tradition but mired in poverty. Being in the Philippines, I am also filled with restlessness, the way most people are restless, constantly looking for answers. The writer in another country is always hounded by questions. Who am I really and why am I here? What am I doing here? How do I keep myself whole with these disjointed realities? The poet in Cebuano, in another country, is beset by impermanence and temporality, by constant departures and arrivals, where the only true arrival is that of coming home to the Philippines. However, the poet hopes of becoming a better poet, senses and sensibilities hopefully sharpened as on a whetstone, assumptions in flux, parallels and dissonances in ways of life gone through, and knowing that these realities are larger than oneself, yet layered by one's hoard of knowledge and imagination of home, about home, and from home. The point of locus is always home. The search for resonance is always among the Filipino Cebuano readers. In a poem, Patan Durbar Square in Nepal, I wrote, I sat beside a gargoyle, pondering upon the rituals of the afternoon, when the sunset stained the skins of both living and the non-living. The heat vaporized its colors upon the seen and the unseen, and I longing for a recognition, an ambiguous meaning, like a dog running eagerly to its master to descend upon me, in Cebuano. In Baldunay Sea, Germany, I wrote in Cebuano of fragmented worlds seen in drops of water in a lake. In Braunschweig, I wrote to a refugee in Cebuano, just go ahead, we will meet at the intersection of tongues. And to a friend living in solitude in the Philippines, I wrote, did you receive my message sent through the roots of trees? To write these lines is knowing that I am being offered possibilities of naming and defining realities. To reclaim the courage to be, to feel home wherever I am. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. For a Filipino diaspora, recurring themes are about one's identity, belongingness, integration, and participation in your host country. I wrote about this in my book, Chasing Windmills. I only have one slide. About one's identity, I know for a fact that it is not static, but dynamic. I started as a Filipino activist, going to the Netherlands to gather support for the Filipino people's struggle for national freedom and democracy. But as I moved on to the Dutch society, also engaging with other Filipino migrants, other migrants of other nationalities, and with the Dutch society, I realized for myself that I had to find my place in this society. So this brings me to the next theme about belongingness. Belonging for me is to make connections, to make bridges, to build relationships. And as a Filipino migrant in the Netherlands, I tried to build relations with the Dutch society where I was in the upbringing of my two daughters in a mixed culture. I tried to make a diploma. I got master's degree for psychology in a Dutch university. I worked in Dutch institutions, and I even became a city councilor in the city where I lived. And at the moment, I am active with the climate, with the activism for climate justice in the Netherlands. But at the same time, while I was doing all this, I never really stopped my connectedness to the Philippines, especially for Philippine development. Because belonging for me is a choice. It is a choice you have to make, and I made the choice. And for me, it is belonging to both societies. To belong to the society where I now live in the Netherlands, but at the same time, to continue to belong to the Philippines. And it takes a lot of effort and courage to do that. You are constantly balancing between the two countries. Anyway, with my book, Chasing Windmills, I find it important. I don't see myself, an author is not only writing a book and have it published. For me, being an author is engaging with your potential readers and readers. So I always take time to engage with Filipino migrants, for example, so that we may, through my book, we could have a sharing of our own struggles, of how we try to find our place in the society where we are in, but also how to maintain our Filipino heritage. And I actually learned a lot from them. So I usually have this picture. I usually go to people's homes, to a group of friends, and just that intimate dialogue, ongoing conversation with other Filipino migrants, and I learned a lot from them. In fact, my second book, The Heart of a Mother, is actually stories of other mothers from all walks of life, from other cutting across cultures about their motherhood. And my book just recently got translated to German. I saw the German edition of my book for the first time today. It is in the Philippine stand. And actually, it is also my wish, my desire to have my book, especially Chasing Windmills, published in various languages in the countries where there are many Filipino migrants. Because with my book, I actually want to reach out to the nationals in these countries with lots of Filipino migrants, because I want to give them a broader perspective of how it is to be a migrant. So that's also one of my advocacies, and also one part of my engaging with my readers. Yeah, I think that was it. It's a short one, but I just wanted to give an idea, to share my desire that for me, writing a book and have it published is for me more of an is more engaging with my readers, and that's why also with my book it's a memoir, but through my personal experiences, also my inner stories, how I have transformed myself. Through that, I could hopefully also reach out to people who can relate with my stories, and through that, we can also share our stories, because I believe that every one of us has a story to tell.
So now we're going to open to the audience for question and answer session for about 10 to 15 minutes. Does anybody have a question for, okay, we have there. They're coming, oh, Jojo, they're coming with a mic for you.
Oh, thank you. Question to you three. When you dream, do you dream in Dutch, British English, or German? Or when you have nightmares, do you have nightmares in Dutch, British English, or German?
I don't know. Sometimes it's all mixed. One of the things I forgot to say was when you're in the diaspora, there's a kind of, at the beginning you feel like you're over here and your home is over there. But as you grow into the place that you've moved into, it all becomes one place. So like I feel very, very at home in the UK. It's home to me. My children are there, my husband is there. But the Philippines continues to be a home that I intensely love. And so I do dream of the Philippines, and when I dream of the Philippines, I speak in whatever language happens to be spoken. So, in the Philippines, and daming so many languages, right? So, my nightmares, I don't remember them.
Yeah. I think I dream in both languages, and yeah, I think it depends on the dream, because if I have an argument or really heated discussion about a topic, but something which is related to Dutch context, for example, when I was working, then because I also think in Dutch when I think about those topics, because that's my everyday life, especially when I was still working. I'm already retired, and I'm actually trying to write every morning my thoughts in Dutch, because that is my way how not to lose it. Yeah, so it depends on the topic. And my nightmare, I don't know.
Esther, what are your nightmares in?
I had a nightmare last night when I was in my hotel, and just last night it was rather cold, and I called the manager because there were boys, but they are actually typical of the boys in the streets in my room, young children, and they were under my bed and running around all. And I said, why do you let children? And then the hotel manager said, don't worry.
What language?
I spoke to the hotel manager. I said, why do you let children in here? But they were Filipino boys on the streets. No, I think I'll write a poem about it.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
and they were speaking in Tagalog to you.
No, he speaks in English to me. And he said, those children were just living across the street. They won't hurt you.
You were having a stress dream about this talk. That's what it was.
Probably.
I had a nightmare.
Probably. But I don't consider it a nightmare. But the thing is, I really...
That's so vivid.
Yeah, it's vivid.
I'm going to have that dream tonight.
The children in the street children, they are in tattered clothes. And they are barefoot. And they are, they have dirt all over. And they just don't care. I mean, did not steal anything.
I have a question for my fellow panel. You know, when I arrived in England, I don't know when you arrived in your country, but when I arrived, it was really like you had to spend all your time disproving that you're not a mail order bride. It was like a constant thing. And then you kind of ran into, there was a weird thing where the Filipinos who were there, I was trying to befriend Filipinos that I met. They didn't want to be my friend because I was different. Like I was not a domestic helper. I was an outsider. So it was very, very lonely.
Yeah.
Even though you try, nobody wants to be your friend. What was your experience arriving?
With me, it's different because I have a Filipino husband, and we came together. And at that time, there were also a lot of Filipino mail order brides, and even so a catalog because there was not still online, digital. 1983. And the Filipinos I met were mostly also married to Dutch, and sometimes because when I first met them, I was alone, so they would assume that I am also like them. And then in another occasion, when my husband would come with me, they would all be surprised. And I had to apologize that I am not a mail order bride. I had to, I don't know, because because when they see that, they somehow felt maybe less, and I felt so guilty about it, so I had to apologize. So I actually, when I'm alone, I actually don't bring up the topic about my husband. Only when they see it, then they look, oh, they're surprised. But when I'm in the street, I like to have my husband with me, especially when I was pregnant. I was very young. They thought I'm a little girl, pregnant. That's with the Dutch. So I want to have my husband with me to say, I'm married. So it depends. But among Filipinas, I would try to, not to emphasize that my husband is a Filipino.
How about you, Esther? How did it feel when you arrived in the foreign land?
Oh, God, I was very young. I was, so I can't, it feels strange when I look at all the Germans. I'm looking for my husband. Where's my husband? They all look the same. So I said, oh, I have to remember what clothes he is wearing. And that's what I also feel when
They
I
all
go
look
to
the
the
same?
Philippines. They all look the same.
You know, one of the weird things when I arrived, because it was just after the Marcos government fell, I was like trying to engage and make conversation. You know, I was a journalist. I have things that I could say. And the only thing they wanted to ask me was, what about Imelda's shoes? That was all they wanted to talk about. And I was, do we have time? Can I read a poem? Yeah, I wrote a poem. I was whenever I get upset, I write a poem, and I'm not normally upset. So this was like one of the few poems that I've ever written. Okay, I'm just gonna open it. There it is. Okay, it's called Small Talk. How is Imelda Marcos? Are her shoes still on the go? When I first came to London, it was all they wished to know. I tried to say that there was more to me than meets the eye, that a flat brown nose and straight black hair does not mean I can't ask why. They don't try to get to know me or find out what I do or say, fine weather, isn't it? Or ask me, how are you? I tried to talk of normal things like politics and fashion, burglaries, movie stars, sport, and television. I wanted them to talk to me the way they talk to each other. But all that seemed to interest them was Imelda's collection of shoe leather.
That's so wonderful. I love that. Can I ask, how have things changed since you first arrived in the 80s? Can you talk to, do people think about you with more nuance now? It's not just mail order brides, or is it still kind of the same as a centralized Filipina in a European country?
Shall I answer that?
Yeah. I would like everybody to answer.
Do you know, I think what happened was I changed. Because you can't blame people who have never met a Filipino from thinking that we are all refugees of volcanic eruptions. You can't blame them. That's all that they see. And all I can be is not shrink away from that narrative, but show them that there is another narrative. I developed confidence. When I had children, I developed a lot more confidence because it's really hard having children. And you have to talk to other people because the children have a social life and you are their social director. And it made me meet a lot more people. And I realized that, everybody suffers from that kind of essentializing that, if you're a housewife, people will treat you in a certain way. If you're this, everyone suffers from a kind of degree of that. And so I thought, I'm not going to let I'm not going to let that be who I am, the person who is being treated like whatever. I'm just going to be me, and then maybe that's going to transform the way people feel about me. And I think it does. It does do that.
For me, when I came here, the first 10 years, I was involved with the political work for the Filipino people struggle. So I had a different perspective, and I always came up with issues, social issues in the Philippines, but in a way that it's not, it's not a pitiful country with pitiful people, poor people, but I also show really the struggle. But then when I started, I went out of the movement and I started to work in a Dutch institution, and I noticed that I had this feeling I had to prove myself twice, double, that, that I'm good. And I'm actually quite angry with myself about that because there are events, for example, when I got accepted for another position, a Dutch colleague who also applied for that told me, somehow insinuated that I got the position because I am colored or because I have a migrant background. And it really angers me, but at the same time, so I even had to say, no, but I have a master's degree, So I didn't like myself saying that, but sometimes there are situations that I have to. But I also actually get positive comments from colleagues because they see me hardworking. That's a negative of hardworking. When you don't like to work for some time, then they would see that Anyway, I would also always get a comment, I also know other Filipinos, and I've noticed that Filipinos are hardworking and are good in what they do. And actually, they also mean Filipinos who are working as domestic workers, working in hotels. And I feel proud about it. And I said, yes, that's so. We do our work. Whatever work we do it well. And we are dedicated to that. So I always have this in trying to, build myself, giving myself a good feeling for myself. I actually try to look into the positive aspects, and I try to amplify that. These are the Filipinos. Yeah.
So recently, my poems have been translated into German by Sibylle Cliffinghouse. The title of the book is called Wo is a Drachenflieger. I gave these books as gifts to the friends of my husband who are like doctors, and my husband finished university, who are doctors or lawyers. I still have not given these books to the friends of my parents-in-law, for example, who comes from a different background because they don't really know me. They only look at me as a Filipina, but the ones who come from the universities, for example, although I don't speak German that well, they somehow can estimate and calculate what background do I have in the Philippines. So I have a certain kind of respect. So I give these books, my book, to them, and they're very happy to get it. And well, anyway, that only happens this year, 2025. And that somehow makes me feel, okay, I'm home. I'm in Germany. I've written a book in German, not in German, translated in German. Well, this makes me feel good.
One of the weird things that happened to me was, when you live far, far away. When I was living in the Philippines, I had no interest in history, none at all. But when you're far away from your country, you kind of look at it, and then you suddenly begin to understand things. Because when you're living in the chaos, chaotic politics, everything, when I was a journalist in the Philippines, I was always thinking, what does it mean? What does it all mean? But when I had the distance of being in London, I was able to, I developed an interest in history. And my last two novels were histories that from the Philippines. So one is about the 1899 invasion of the Philippines by the United States. It's a child who's growing up in a village, and he knows that he lives in this village and he doesn't know the outside world. And suddenly an American turns up and he's got hair the color of straw and skin the color of milk and eyes the color of the sky. And he looks like a monster. And this child's life is about to change. And my next book, which is here on the table, is Wild Song. And it's the story of the same characters in that book, Bone Talk. But they are taken by the American colonial administration to the United States to be exhibited in the World Fair of St. Louis. And I have 3 copies of Wild Song here. This is the one that appeared in the United Kingdom. It was shortlisted for several prizes. This came out last week in the United States. I hope to go to the United States to promote it at some point, but I'm a little bit scared. And this is the German edition, which I have to say is utterly beautiful. And it won the Lux Prize a few weeks ago. So I'm very, very proud of that. I've been doing a kind of little book tour, doing readings in German of the book in bookstores, and it's astonishing how Germans like being read to, because they will have somebody reading the German book, and everyone just wants to listen to somebody reading. And one of the most common questions that I get asked is, "Will you say something in Tagalog?" which is our language in the Philippines. And tomorrow I'm doing a reading where they asked me to translate the first page of my book in Tagalog and read it because they wanted to hear the language. Isn't that interesting?
Yes. Yeah, actually, because I'm a mother of 2 daughters, they are now adults and have their own family. I am already a grandmother of 4 kids, 4 grandchildren, and the 5th one is coming. But I actually noticed that how I am being appreciated when the kids were still small among the other parents in the school of my children, because I have interaction with them, because I get them from school, was actually how my children excelled in their school. Because I have this mother of the best friend of my second daughter, and I told her, sometimes I feel actually a bit, I don't have this confidence, because I don't know how the other parents are consider me or see me. And then this mother said, no, they actually look real high up on you. I say, oh, how's that? Because your children are excelling well, and the children they know who are good. We don't have this first honor, second honor as in the Philippines, but the children know very well who are having high grades. And luckily they could study well, so I also gain pride in it. But at the same time, my children also told me, Mom, you can be proud just with what you are doing. You don't have to be proud because of us, because you alone, without us, you have a lot of things to be proud of. And actually, they're true. But in the Dutch society, I noticed that I had to get also my pride from them, because they don't see what I'm doing, but of course they can see what my children have achieved from their children also. So that's also an aspect of dealing with society and trying to trying to assure myself that I'm good enough. One of my reflections.
Thank you. Do we have another question from the audience? Yes.
Hi. I hate to be the downer. because it's also positive, but let's turn this around. So how do you feel when you read about what's going on now? The issues, do you feel shame? You feel pity for the Filipinos? You know, you're far away from your original home and all of this is going on. I was wondering, like Candy or Maya or Ma'am, how do you feel about when people say, oh, you're Filipino, we hear all of this is going on? I mean, you go like, I don't know, or I'm just wondering how it affects you now.
I try to stay in touch with the Philippines. I read the papers. I read all the papers from the Philippines. I'm still a news. I'm still like obsessed with the news. I'm following the corruption cases, but I have a more. And I get angry. I'm very, very angry about what's happening. But I have a kind of more analytical, because I'm far away. And I'm beginning to see patterns, like in a way that I couldn't when I was in the midst of the chaos. And because I'm writing history now, I'm beginning to kind of make connections, and that really helps, because you feel like there is a way out. These things don't continue forever. But yeah, I am still connected, and I am very angry, and I don't know what to do, and I am helpless.
Maybe I always tell to others, maybe it comes with age. I will be 68 already in December. So I noticed from myself, I tend to be rather sober. You know, with what's happening in the Philippines, of course, I'm always proud of the Philippines, but then I always have this feeling, you know, we will come to that. You know, I have trust in the future, actually, of the Philippines. Yeah, and I think of course, I have lived for so many years in the Netherlands already, while I also regularly go to the Philippines. But then you can also see that from a distance, and you have also seen how is it going on with other parts of the world. So I am also able to relativize things, and which makes me actually sort of I'm cool with it, you know. Yeah.
It's not anger, it's really a kind of sadness. And also, I feel happy when we see sparks, when people go out in the streets, for example. Why am I happy with that? I'm happy with that when they go out into the streets to protest. I still have some grandchildren in the Philippines, and I think about how are they gonna live? And my children, the parents of these grandchildren, don't want to leave the country. And I still think that the Philippines is my home, and I'm still thinking of building a retirement home in the Philippines. So it's not anger.
You know, if I may add, because at this moment there are a lot of demonstrations going on, especially from the youth. And the issue is about corruption. And corruption has been there for years and years and years. But then when I see this, somehow I'm positive that somehow this will contribute to denormalizing corruption. Because corruption is really like a normal thing to do now from bottom up. You know, it's not just the higher ups. So with these demonstrations and with this anger, with this shaming, actually, politicians who are really corrupt, I hope that our attitude to corruption will somehow move towards it is not something normal. And even just that teeny bitty, I have hope for that.
I'm really inspired when I see on Instagram all of the Gen Z They make reels and they're talking about corruption, and they're trying to educate everybody. You all have to know this and you have to do this. And you're thinking, well, we weren't like that when we were younger because, well, we were under martial law rights. But they're going to change things. Because I visit schools and talk about books and meet a lot of young people, you feel they're strong and they can do things. And now, because we're kind of like, I feel like a bit like I'm in the twilight of my life.
And
I don't feel like it's not going to be me who's going to fix these things.
But I think for me it's also a question of, because I was once in the movement in the Philippines. I mean, really underground movement with the Communist Party of the Philippines, supporting armed struggle. I did not do it, but anyway, that kind of movement. And for me, well, it failed. And I even have lots of criticisms about it. And in fact, my next book will be about that. So in the sense, that also made me, I did that for so many years in my life. And then, okay, it didn't result to something. But in a way, it made me not bitter, but actually more, how should I say that? I'm okay with it. That's a long process, It made me actually patient. Yeah, that's the word. It made me patient for what is happening in the Philippines. And actually, I'm so frustrated with what's happening in the world, with Gaza, with Palestine. Even with the peace now, I hope that it will not just, it's still an occupation, it's still colonialism. And I get angry with that, but then I think it's also about my age, and I have lived a life, So everything that comes hereafter are just a bonus. And I said, we talked with my husband, for me, one thing, I'll just do what is right. I don't have some things will not be achieved in my lifetime, okay. But then, for me, as long as I do the right thing, that's okay with me. So maybe it comes with age.
I think we have time for another question. Okay.
Thank you so much for this discussion. I was really looking forward. I think this question of home has always been following me ever since I was a child. I'm half Palestinian, half Ukrainian, and I grew up as a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon. And as a Palestinian refugee, I'm never allowed to go to Palestine. And ever since we moved to Ukraine, in a few months, the full-scale invasion began. And this question of home has always been a part of me. And when we came to Switzerland, I felt this sense of belonging with the people who made me feel heard and seen. But as soon as I started speaking about what's happening in Palestine and Gaza, I no longer felt belonging with those who made me feel heard and seen because they decided to stay silent. And now it makes me question myself, what is more important, to speak up the truth or to stay silent to feel this sense of belonging? And to me, I understood that I'd rather speak up the truth and stay alone than have this sense of belonging and this sense of home that I have always been searching for, but to stay silent. So how is it with you?
I mean, that's...
in terms of like the Filipino experience, because we lived, I don't know if you were there when the overthrow of the government happened, when the Marcos era. And afterwards, we were so jubilant, like we were so happy. We thought that we'd done it. We got rid of the thorn. It was all going to be better now. And I remember as a journalist going on state visits I did a state visit to Japan with a new president, and everyone was congratulating us. Well done, Filipinos, look what you've done. And then many years later, the son of the dictator is the president. And it's just, it just feels, if you have suffered, if you have lost, like I have lost relatives who were killed under the Marcos regime. It just feels like the world turns and turns, and then it just goes back to those terrible places. And I really wish I could, I wish I could like end with saying, it's all going to be better. But I think all I can say is we have to keep resisting, questioning, talking. You talk about silence, but we are in the business of speaking. and talking about and trying to resist. And you do it in many, many ways. And sometimes you just have to just keep trying. It's not a message of hope, but a message of vigilance and persistence is all I can say.
Yeah, for me, it's actually connected with what I just earlier said. For me now is, how do I go through life? I just do what I need to do. And I just continue to do the right thing. I make sure that I am in the right side of history. And because I don't know anymore how this further unfolds. But then at least for me, I can tell to myself and to my grandchildren, I did what I needed to do. And I think that is also the legacy I can leave to my grandchildren. They're still small. That's why I also wrote my book, Chasing Windmills, because I thought they should know who their grandmother is, where I come from. So that's also my motivation to write that. And then just to let them know, your grandmother did what she needed to do, and she's in the right side of history.
Last month, my granddaughter, she's 17 years old, attended her first protest. She is studying as a senior high school in the University of the Philippines, which is famous for radicalizing its students to the left. And okay, we let her. We let her, regardless of the risks she will take in the streets with other teenagers like her. We let her. We don't tell her no. We know we're a bit, scared, but that is her truth, and that is who she is. Within Philippine society, the young ones have to define who they are. And that is, if that's the way, then let that be.
Thank you so much for that questioning and letting us end on that really profound note. I think we're going to close off this panel, and thank you for the audience for attending.